Hello, everyone. We welcome you to another episode of Armpit Intellectuals. Thanks for tuning in to the Pits of Knowledge. Today, we will be discussing an important, albeit niche, and forgotten part of Pakistan's leftist history: communist literature in Pakistan. We will be focusing on three communist literary figures who are often discussed collectively and individually as post-partition communist figures. And those three are Sajjad Zaheer, Saadat Hassan Manto, and Mohammad Hassan Askari. And a big shout out to Kamran Asdar Ali and his book we used for this research, Surkh, Salam, Communist Politics and Class Activism in Pakistan, 1947 to 1972. So let's get into the Communist Party and Sajjad Zaheer, who was the founder, I believe, right?
Yeah, let me get into the introduction of the Communist Party of Pakistan, the CPP, and as you mentioned, Sajjad Zaheer. He was a cultural, intellectual, creative, and was the utmost importance to the CPP. Sajjad Zaheer, CPP's founder, was an accomplished short story writer and literary critic. However, he did not write much in the year following the creation of Pakistan in 1947 due to incarceration and captivity.
समाज और जिंदगी के रिश्ते उनके लिए लाजिम व मलजूम थे। वियतनाम के दौरे से लौटे थे तो हमने उनसे आपकी मुलाकात कराई थी। इस मुलाकात के दौरान भी बन्ने भाई ने यानी मरहूम सैयद सज्जाद ज़हीर ने कलम को जिहाद आज़ादी की शमशीर बरहना करार दिया। मैं तो समझता हूँ कि किसी कौम की आज़ादी के जज्बे को मौजूदा ज़माने में, पुराने ज़मानों की और बात है कि जब जालिम बादशाह और जालिम हुक्मरान बरसों साल रहते थे, लेकिन ये दौर जो दूसरी जंग अजीम के बाद शुरू हुआ है और जिसमें दुनिया में आज़ादी की क़ुव्वतें इतनी ज़्यादा बढ़ गई हैं, मैं समझता हूँ कि ऐसे ज़माने में एक पूरी कौम को उसकी आज़ादी से महरूम रखना नामुमकिन है। आज़ादी की लड़ाई जहाँ भी लड़ी जाए, मैं तो समझता हूँ कि कोई भी सच्चा अदीब उससे मुतासिर हुए बगैर नहीं रह सकता, क्योंकि आखिर हम इंसानियत का फ़रोग़ चाहते हैं, हम इंसान का एजाज़ चाहते हैं, उसका इफ्तिखार चाहते हैं, ये चाहते हैं कि वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा उसको आज़ाद फ़िज़ा में अपनी कौम की कल्चर को बढ़ाने का, फैलाने का और तरक्की देने का मौका मिले।
Zaheer did, however, engage in other forms of writing and cultural critique. He had an interesting letter exchange with the poet and short story writer Ahmaduddin Kasmi on an essay Kasmi wrote in a local newspaper, Ehtijaj or Ehtiyat, Protest and Prudence, which was published in 1948 in the Urdu Daily Imroz, of which Faiz Ahmad Faiz was also the editor. The Faiz Ahmad Faiz. Sajjad Zaheer then went on to criticize and attack Kasmi's essay in a true communist fashion by acknowledging Kasmi's distaste towards the elite class, but attacked him for saying that Islam had brought about social and economic revolution, for which he rebutted that, claiming that even under Islam, a group of human beings continue to be exploited and oppressed.
Ahmed Fez, eh?
Yeah.
I think he was also a member of the CPP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's correct.
So, like you were saying about Sajjad Zaheer's, I guess, stance on what Qasmi had written, to further that, according to Zaheer, Islam was not able to eradicate the class system and had become a monarchy by the time it had reached South Asia, which did not allow questioning the social order. And so, I guess, according to Zaheer, Islam would not eradicate the class system, nor is it a complete system as society is ever changing. So he obviously had like his critiques of Islam and kind of like how it played on the class system in Pakistan, like how he felt it was contributing to the class system.
It kind of used the already present class differentiation to its own benefit.
Right. Exactly. And actually, to back his claim, Zaheer used the example of the third Caliph Usman, whom he accused of banishing a companion of the Prophet, Abu Zar Ghafari, who had egalitarian ideals and also criticized Usman's campaign against the Kharijis, a group that Zaheer linked with the class struggle.
So Sajjad Zaheer continued to rebut against Qasmi by arguing that by bringing Islam into the conversation, we are playing and giving into the hands of those who want to divert people's attention from the real struggle, the class struggle.
Mm-hmm.
He asserted that CPP's loyalty cannot be to the Pakistan of Muslim League landlords.
That's looking at you, Mr.
Nawaz Sharif.
Yeah.
No, I think this is that Muslim League that started off.
Oh,
It's
true.
not.
This was
This
obviously
was of the
this was like,
Liaquat Ali Khan, the Qaid-e-Azams
yes,
of that time.
yes. So this was like 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
50s more like. Yeah.
Right, 50s.
The vested interests who had sold the country to the British and enemies of freedom and democracy. I mean, that's what you're seeing right now today as well. Rather, his loyalty and the loyalty of every progressive, and when I say what you see today is what you see that the country is being sold and run for the benefits of the West.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, his loyalty and the loyalty of every progressive intellectual he asserted should be with the Pakistani masses, who are the true inheritors of Indian Muslim culture.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
Indian
I don't
Muslim
know
culture.
how true that is, but
No, but what does Indian Muslim culture even mean, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, Bangladesh could have also, but Bangladesh was still part of Pakistan. Maybe not as true today as what it was back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
He also cautioned against the conspiracy of the capitalist elite who use Islam, nationality, and language to disrupt the unity of workers and peasants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was pretty, I guess, anti-capitalist,
Yeah,
anti-elitist,
until later.
anti-statist, some would argue.
Yeah,
He-
anti-status quo, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he also urged that intellectuals cannot simply have sympathy for the working class struggles, but rather they must join those struggles
And
and attach themselves to these struggles. And I really like that. It's very
it's not like someone an armchair intellectual, right?
exactly,
Like people sitting like just in chairs and writing and stuff
exactly.
in their like I don't know in Switzerland in Alps
Mm-hmm.
and not really sort of being with the people and joining the struggle.
Alps.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
whatever.
Super elites must be super elite.
Alps or like I don't know Banigala mein baithe hain ya, I
Yeah,
don't know,
that's true.
I don't know kahin bhi
equally
baith
as
ke
elite.
equally, yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, I really like that he said that, and I think that it also echoes like a lot of other leftist sentiments, like Iqbal Ahmed's, for example. And I think that it's just a really important point, like especially in like Pakistan's context, which has such a, I guess, like deeply divided class structure. It's like very classist, and like yeah, definitely like for the elites to use their privilege. I just want to really enunciate what he's saying. 'Cause
Okay,
I
yeah.
feel like it's very important that, yeah, that the elites, instead of, I guess, the way that people will see horrible things happening in like Pakistan, right? And
Right.
they're sitting there, but they have this level of privilege that they're watching it on the TV or reading the news and going, oh my God, like that's it. And then they're going back to their
Right.
kiddie
No,
parties.
even the intellectuals, like people who are like elite intellectuals,
Mm-hmm.
they're not gonna be involved with the people. Like today we do see
Right.
like some of the leftist parties, like Armed Workers Party and like the other one I forgot, Mazdoor Kisan Party.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get together with
Hakuke
the
Khalq
Hakuk
too.
Khalq, yeah,
Yeah, Khalq.
with the proletariat, like how Marx says it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Gramsci also said this, like it's basically the cultural hegemony, and you cannot break the cultural hegemony unless you don't get involved with the proletariat themselves.
For sure.
So I mean, again, I'm using this word again because it's a very important and like it's a very this word fits in very well of the armchair intellectual, where there are people who are not just sitting at home, like making a podcast, and not getting involved with the Awam themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
We really took it home.
yeah, we really did. So yeah, so Zaheer, yeah, urged also that this was it was only through this, the joining of these struggles with the working class, with the proletariat, that intellectuals could realize the development of literature, art, and culture, because of course these three tenets are really rooted in like struggle, right? It's really like poetry is at the forefront of the revolution, some would argue.
Right.
And then Qasmi, on the other hand, maintained that Islam and communism complemented each other, and if they were intelligently interpreted, then social justice would be established in the country. And Qasmi also agreed that slavery existed in early Islam, but that this was not true Islam, and emphasized on the importance of ijtihad.
Ijtihad, yeah. I mean, it seems like Qasmi is sort of like, not Qasmi, but Zaheer is kind of the person who's very much not like elitist in a way that Qasmi is. I mean, he's mentioned that like not mentioned, but we see that he did not receive his education from Oxford, nor did he receive them from any Communist Party comrades who had come from India. And he wasn't like an Ashraf man.
Right. So Qasmi wasn't as upper class or elite educated as Zaheer.
Right.
So
Yeah.
where was he from?
He was from Bahawalpur,
Right.
which is in southern Punjab, and
I guess it was
sought
less
him more-
developed at the time, right? If
Yeah,
this
that's
is like
exactly.
50s, yeah.
And insisted that culture had to be respected in order to connect with the masses. Again, like this sort of coming back to the point of, again, the Gramsci of like cultural hegemony, that unless you don't change the culture, you cannot change how the masses are looking at capitalism, and how, because if you don't change culture, they're going to keep coming back to the ideas of capitalism, even if there is a sort of revolution that takes place.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that a lot of Zaheer's beliefs kind of tie in with that. And a lot of his beliefs were being shared by the Communist Party of Pakistan. And a lot of writers actually saw his beliefs as insensitive, and several writers critiqued the CPP due to his exchange with Qasmi, due to this, I guess, divide. Like Qasmi was from, like you mentioned, small town Bahawalpur, and he wasn't an elite educated Ashraf man. And this led to the Muslim League government, actually. This critique of the CPP and of Zaheer led to the Muslim League government enforcing its anti-communism propaganda and labeling the party as anti-statist. Because, I guess, like we just discussed, Zaheer didn't really see the point in... He had his critique of Islam, basically. Like, that was the whole point of the letter exchange with Qasmi, is that he didn't believe that Islam could be not, I guess, like...
Could be the one that'll bring in the social revolution.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it was already had become a monarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the Muslim League government, enforced its anti-communism propaganda and labeled the party as anti-statist. And this was because communists, they were seen to be either siding with Soviet Union or India. And that, of course, made the state suspicious of the communists, or really anyone who they perceived as anti-establishment. And this state paranoia obviously continues on today. So now let's move on to our second communist literary figure, and that is Saadat Hassan Manto. And we'll just start with a quote from Manto. "There is a desire in me to write, but when I sit down to write, my thoughts become chaotic. Even after trying, I cannot separate Hindustan from Pakistan and Pakistan from Hindustan. Continuously, this question arises in my mind. Will Pakistan's literature be different? If yes, then how? All that was written in undivided Hindustan, who will claim that literature? Will it now also be divided? Are the basic problems of our people on both sides not the same? So I guess this quote really encapsulates what was kind of the theme during this time, during Manto's time. Like, it was very, I mean, it was the partition, so of course it's very valid to ask, कि अब literature के साथ क्या होगा?
Yeah, for sure. As he was asking their domains of lives,
Mm-hmm.
it's like Pagal Khane,
Exactly.
like, Pagalon ka tabadla.
Tobatak Singh.
Yeah.
And so the Communist Party of Pakistan was actually a continuation of the Communist Party of India. So I guess it kind of just became like its own entity once Pakistan was formed. And it also controlled APWA, which was the All Pakistan Progressive Writers Association. And that was one of the most influential literary movements in the decade that preceded the partition. And again, Sajjad Zaheer, as a founding member, urged writers to have a thorough mastery of Marxist ideology and insisted on study circles so that intellectuals and creative people, especially those linked to the CPP, should study the works of Marx, Lenin, and Stalin, surprisingly, as well as literature coming from the Soviet Union and progressive literature and journals from Europe and Britain. However, the progressives soon became divided on writers whose work portrayed themes of what they believed to be perversion and pornography, such as the work of Saadat Hassan Manto. And it's ironic because these so-called progressive writers were essentially censoring writers the same way the state apparatus or moralistic society policing would also censor. And in much of Manto's work, he focuses on the most marginalized and oppressed classes of society, such as sex workers. And he had been criticized by the progressive writers for being a middle-class man trying to showcase rural and peasant class values, of which he had no direct knowledge and thus cannot portray them. And an example of someone who said this was Mohammad Safdar, who was also part of the Progressive Writers Association. And these progressive writers acknowledge that while Manto may have produced good art at a particular moment in his literary career, he had since become escapist, or had since become one of the escapist writers who took refuge in sexual themes.
Yes, there was another progressive intellectual, Aziz Ahmed, who in the late 40s also accused Manto of being so obsessed with sexuality that he wondered whether he was mentally stable. This is similar to the criticism received by Noon Meen Rashid, a major modernist poet of the era. One of the Manto stories analyzed by Kamran Asdar Ali in his book is Munasib Karwai, which opens with a Muslim married couple who, after hiding in their basement for several days, feel the urge to come out. And they go to their neighbor's house and plead them to kill them, as they could not bear it anymore.
They could not bear being in their basement?
Their basement, I guess.
Wow.
They were just going out, just like asking for...
So I guess this was written during partition, so they're probably hiding out in their basement from the mobs or
From the mobs,
whatever.
yeah. The neighbors, apparently who were Jains, said that it was against their religion to kill people. After some thought on the request, they delivered the couple to an adjoining neighborhood who did not share the same beliefs.
Right, so they basically just said कि हम नहीं कर सकते हैं.
Just go to other...
किसी और की कर जाओ.
हमारे पास नमक नहीं है. Yeah, और हमारे पास प्याज नहीं है, whatever.
Right. And I think it's in this vein, that's just a great example of how Manto's stories portrayed the absurdity of partition, right? Like just this, I think he tried to make it seem like that, like जैसे तुम कह रहे थे, like
just like any
it's like yeah, and especially in a climate when everyone was trying to either understand or forget about the violence and trauma that had occurred, stories like Manto's made people feel unsettled and uncomfortable. And I think that was a big purpose of them, was to make people question like the absurdity of partition.
Yeah, and that's exactly why he was also taken to court several times, where the state had put charges on him on writing indecent literature. It is ironic that the progressives thought Manto embodied middle-class values at his work, especially in the late 40s, challenged and disrupted middle-class and bourgeoisie morals and values. So,
right. Yeah, it's
they were
actually
just
very
kind of,
interesting.
yeah.
Just this like, that he was taken to court several times because Ismat Chugtai was also very similar to him, and they were friends.
गैर इंसानी दिलचस्पियों में अपना वक्त अपनी तसल्ली हासिल करती है। तो क्या औरतों की आज़ादी के पैगाम को नहीं आप दे रही? क्यों नहीं? क्यों नहीं? औरत को और मर्द को दोनों का आज़ाद, दोनों आज़ाद नहीं हो सकते। अगर औरत आज़ाद नहीं है तो मर्द आज़ाद कभी नहीं होगा।
You can see in the movie that they had made, I think the Indian one or the Pakistani one, where Faiz Ahmad Faiz actually testifies against him in the court.
Wow.
In being that, his writings is actually not.
So he was probably one
decent.
of those progressive writers who also critiqued him. Yeah.
Critiqued him, yeah.
Yeah, and this idea of perversity, because like for Lihaf, right, Ismat Chugtai was also taken to court similarly at around the same time or similar time, and I guess it was just like this. It's interesting. It just portrays like this idea of like the Muslim homeland.
I mean, they criticized him for like his liberal lifestyle, excessive drinking, and
I guess in that movie as
mannerisms.
well, they show that.
They
liked a good
show
drink.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, I guess he was just dealing with the trauma of partition.
Yeah.
Whatever way he could. And so actually when he was questioned why his work focused so strongly on sex, because like we mentioned, and from of course what we've read or what I've read as well, is just that like I mean his stories, right? It's a lot of focus on like sex worker, sexuality, just like doing harmful things to the body, the female body. So and so when he was questioned why his work focuses so strongly on sex, he responded that, in quotes, "Man's struggle against hunger and his need for sex are universal facts that even religious texts discuss. So why should literature not represent the relationship between man and woman?" And Manto asserted that he does not write on sexuality, but portrays the sexual lives of particular men and women. So, he wasn't trying to just talk about sex. He was trying to talk about sex in these different dynamics, power dynamics, right? Especially like around the time of partition, he had this story, Thanda Gosht.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was, a very good example of what he was trying to achieve.
How to portray sex.
Yeah. And he said that those who seek sexual pleasure in such stories should understand that writers like him are not wrestling coaches who train people in the techniques of the art. They are mere observers of what's happening around them. And further in response to the progressive criticism, he states that writers like him need to be considered as optimists. And that actually reminds me of a Gramsci quote, since you mentioned Gramsci earlier about how pessimism, I think he said something like pessimism of the mind, optimism of the will, or something. So Manto said that writers like him need to be considered as optimists who also find light in society's darkness. He also acknowledges that this kind of writing can be a bitter pill. Like the leaves from the neem tree, they are bitter, but they do cleanse the blood. He said.
That's very relevant of him to mention neem, because that's a very indigenous to the South Asian soil.
The soil, the land. And there are a lot of things, obviously, in the land that kind of unite Hindustan and Pakistan, as he was saying.
Exactly,
like it's the same land.
It's the same land, yeah.
That's a really nice point.
So moving on to another person from the same soil is Mohammad Hassan Askari, who was born in 1919 and passed away in 1978, is also known as the first literary critic of Urdu literature, that is in the Western sense. So first he was basically critiquing Western writers like Chekhov as an example. He was also one of the major critics of progressives writes Zaheer Ali. And he further adds that Askari is an important voice in history of Urdu criticism, and Amir Mufti rightfully proclaims him as a magisterial intellect, a polyglot of staggering erudition.
Wow.
Although Askari used to be close with the progressive in his youth, as they were the dominant literary movement at the time. He later became associated with the Jadidiyat, or the modernist movement. And again, like poets like Noon Rashid also joined.
Wow. Yeah. And I believe that we had researched also was that Askari critiqued Manto's literary work by asserting that Manto's work was not perverse. So that was kind of his analysis of Manto's work. And he said that it instead showed the realities of the most marginalized, especially with partition as the backdrop. And Manto's stories do not judge or condemn the perpetrators of violence, nor do they shed tears for the victims. Instead, as Asdar Ali said in his book, they seek to portray how in extraordinary times people sometimes have ordinary habits. And Manto, according to Askari, has more faith in human nature than people had given him credit for. And upon being asked what it means to be human and echoing Askari's sentiments of Manto, Manto himself said, "I am human, the same human who has always betrayed humanity and sold other humans as commodities in the marketplace. I am the same human who has attained the heights of prophethood, yet also the same human who has murdered many of them as well. I have all the same positive and negative aspects within me that any other human possesses." And regarding the depiction of violence in literature, progressive writers were focused on a way to portray balanced killings, which I found this to be a very interesting point, actually. So this idea of balanced killings and how they should be portrayed in literature was they should represent that people are being killed equally. So like killing an equal number of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs in fiction that portrayed the violence of partition, but just making it equal so that it's not like, oh, there's like some kind of bias.
Yeah.
And Askari believed that this was a form of people-pleasing because, you're just kind of being neutral and diplomatic. And so instead he asserted that, in his words, by merely speaking about the social aspects of violence, progressives forgot that real individuals were behind these acts. And without understanding the motivations and complexity of these actions, it was difficult to pronounce judgments. And so what he's essentially saying, obviously, is that just be truthful, like just show what the violence
was exactly.
Yeah. And Asdar Ali further writes in the book that Askari acknowledged that the progressive writers, by showing broad contours of evil and oppression, wanted us to hate the perpetrators of violence. But, Askari argued, to love or hate people, we need depictions of humans who are alive with emotions, not mere sketches of those who committed violence and their victims. So I guess what Askari was kind of calling for was to portray the nuance of, I guess, just humans. And that's why he applauded Manto's work, I guess you could say, is because Manto was showing that nuance, that taking the most marginalized and just showing their humanity, right? When a lot of people were probably just, at the time, were probably just shunning them or just not seeing them as important. And
or just keeping most, as if you look at just the literary critics, they were just being involved in a high culture sort of thing. Right? They were only sort of, they still wanted to be that darbaris kind of thing, or Mughlon ke darbar mein aake presenting some high art or high culture, using more Persian language. So just to conclude this, what the progressives all purportedly had in common was their idea of a regenerative state for the Muslims of South Asia.
Right.
And a state that homogenized Urdu as its main language, especially considering Zaheer and Askari. Now, I don't particularly agree with this, but that's what they wanted. for example, were upper class. I mean, like Zaheer and Askari were upper class and caste, elite, educated North Indian Muslim men. Like, that is also considered that the Ashrafia
Right.
nowadays.
And it was that, and yeah, and that's a great example of how they, wanted this homogenized Urdu language, which also is right. Like, it's just, I guess it's kind of, yeah, makes me question Zahir's politics, for example, as the founder of CPP, like wanting this central, like, Urdu language in Pakistan, like, kind
Yeah,
of forgoing like the other indigenous languages that were already present, like
already present. Yeah,
Sindhi, as an
yeah,
example, Balochi.
yeah. Baloch, Pakhtuns, Saraiki, like different Barui, or like there are different languages. There's more than 4 languages there.
Right.
So, and so yeah, so I mean, that's what their idea was of a one unit state, I guess, following
Mm-hmm.
Jinnah's legend, or Jinnah's work to be done, art project,
Vision. Yeah.
vision.
Art project. No, that's a good one.
So Manto died relatively young. He was in his early 40s and essentially drank himself to the destitute and in perpetual debt in a new country. He left behind his wife and 3 daughters.
Right. And I guess that's portrayed in that film as well, right?
Yeah, definitely it is. I think that's what it leads to. Like, he couldn't perform proper duties of the house. Like, his wife is sick and he could not, or he forgets the medicines for his wife or his kid. I'm not sure.
Oh, wow.
Something that's like depicted in that both the movies. That is present in both the movies. Both, I mean, like in Pakistan and India. But it doesn't really matter. Like, I think the Indian one is still better because it's Nawazuddin Siddiqui
Well, that's
who's
the one that was on Netflix,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. I've seen that one. I haven't seen the other one. But no, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the other one is by Sarmat Khusad, and he's, I think,
Wow.
I forgot who's playing Manto, but yeah, I think he's made it. So, I've been talking about Askari. Mohammad Hassan Askari had many ebbs and flows in his career until his death in the late 70s, although Azhar Ali notes that towards the end of his life, he began embracing a pan-Islamic, the idea of Ummah, pan-Islamic perspective, and oriented his leanings towards Islamic teachings.
Yeah.
So उनके पास इनके साथ थोड़ा Junaid
Junaid
Jamshed.
Jamshed. I was
That's what
literally
happened to
thinking
him.
that. Right.
So yeah, but like
Midlife
it's
mullah
midlife
crisis.
mullah. But like if you look at a lot of people, it did happen to a lot of people like that. Starting from
Yeah.
Iqbal or Iqbal, like Iqbal, like Lama Iqbal, and a lot of people after that too, like who were like still it's happens. Like if you look at even big like examples of Imran Khan, they come back and they just like, we're gonna reject Western culture.
Right. Yeah. From
And,
Playboy to,
Maulana.
yeah, basically.
Yeah. So
So what happened to Sajjad Zaheer?
yeah, he also transformed in the eyes of others, and he was also labeled as a reactionary. And on his 100th birthday, so reactionary as opposed to a revolutionary.
Right.
So on his 100th birthday, during a keynote discussion about him at Jamia Millia University. So this happened at Jamia Millia University.
Right. Like after his death.
After his
obviously,
death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, yeah, I guess given like his perspectives on like how he was kind of like anti-Islam, you could say in a way. Like, I don't want to say anti-Islam, but he just wasn't down with the idea of
The
like,
idea of Islam. Yeah.
yeah. And so I can see why people would kind of label him that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess like another interesting point just to conclude this episode that Asdar Ali had posited in the book is that Manto queers history. So he brought in this lens of queer theory, which was pretty interesting. And he claims this by saying Manto is by positing in his stories particular life histories and the related counter logics that emerge from the perversities in quotes, of such existences, and hence provides a critique of the generalized subjectivities that take on the onus of the universal. And Manto's stories can be read as representing his ambivalence and uncertainty about the consolidation of a unitary identity in the Pakistani state. And this essentially suggests that Manto knew that Muslim nationalism would percolate and persist in the newly found nation state of Pakistan, as it does today.